talk about Labor Day since it's coming up.
Let's talk about Labor Day. I think it's especially important to understand the history of Labor Day, given some of the things going on in our country right now. So, Kim's going to play two brief videos about the history that are very interesting, and then we'll discuss.
How's this for a strange idea? A day off from work in honor of work itself. Actually, that is what Labor Day, celebrated in the United States and Canada on the first Monday of every September, is all about. The first American Labor Day was celebrated in New York City on September 5th, 1882, as thousands of workers and their families came to Union Square for a day in the park. It was not a national holiday, but had been organized by a union to honor workers and their hard efforts with a rare day of rest, halfway between July 4th and Thanksgiving. There were picnics and a parade, but there were also protests. The workers had gathered not just to rest and celebrate, but to demand fair wages, the end of child labor, and the right to organize into unions. During the period known as the Industrial Revolution, many jobs were difficult, dirty, and dangerous. People worked for 12 hours, 6 days a week, without fringe benefits such as vacations, health care, and pensions. And if you were young, chances are you were doing manual labor instead of your ABCs and fractions. Children as young as 10 worked in some of the most hazardous places like coal mines or factories filled with boiling vats or dangerous machines. Trying to win better pay, shorter hours, and safer conditions, workers had begun to form labor unions in America and Canada. But the companies they worked for often fought hard to keep unions out and to suppress strikes. At times, this led to violent battles between workers and business owners, with the owners often backed up by the police or even the military. In the following years, the idea of Labor Day caught on in America, with official celebrations reaching 30 states. But then came the violent Haymarket Square riot of 1886, which led to the deaths of several policemen and workers in Chicago and the execution of 4 union leaders. After that, many labor and political groups around the world had begun to mark Haymarket Square on May 1st, which became known as International Workers' Day. In 1894, President Grover Cleveland signed the law making Labor Day a federal holiday in America, only days after he had sent 12,000 soldiers to end a violent railroad strike that resulted in the death of several people. The original September date was kept, partly to avoid the more radical associations of May 1st. Canada also created its Labor Day in 1894. But in spite of this new holiday, it would be a long time before the changes that workers wanted became a reality. In 1938, during the Great Depression that left millions without jobs, President Franklin D. Roosevelt signed a law calling for an 8-hour workday, a 5-day work week, and an end to child labor, some of the first federal protections for American workers. As America and Canada celebrate Labor Day, most of the two countries' children enjoy a day off from school. But it is important to remember that there was a time that every day was a Labor Day for children in America and Canada. And unfortunately, the same fact remains true for millions of children around the world today.
That's great.
A lot of that
That
seems
was a
like
nice
we're
piece.
going backwards, doesn't it?
Yep.
Yeah, because they gonna want children to work after a while.
They've already lowered the age of that you can work in some states.
To what
That
age?
one congressman was talking about picking blueberries when he was a kid. And he was like, why can't they get a job? I worked in school, get some fresh clothes. And they was like, what?
Some of these people have lost their minds. They don't, people take for granted these hard fought, hard earned rights that we have today.
And I think a lot of times we talk a lot about race. I kind of want to say something about that, by the way. I know it's an uncomfortable situation, especially with Trump and everything that's going on. It's a big factor. It has to be mentioned, but there's also gender. Women are a big part of was affirmative action, rights, all that. And I think a lot of women don't realize that they are part of that too. So if you say, I'm gonna take it from them, you're taking it from yourself and your daughters and your nieces and your sisters.
Look at what's her face. When Caroline Levitt was up there the one day, like talking about how awful DEI is and how, that all needs to end. And I'm just thinking in my head, like, you're up there because of DEI. And you are literally trying to stomp on your own career by saying these things. And they're so stupid or they're so hateful that they don't care.
And if she didn't have blonde hair and look like she does and kiss his butt like she does, she'd be out.
Yeah.
'Cause
What
there's
is it?
no-
White women overall benefited from DEI, the number one.
Because if you look at those, like
Yes.
the women that are on his cabinet, most of them, those are not strong, like independent women. They need, their men in their life, like Vince McMahon and whatever Levitt's husband is. Like,
None of the people in his cabinet are strong people. None of them.
I was just going to say, they need to read history. Go back. Look what was happening to women. We weren't allowed to do anything. If we didn't find a man,
the suffrage movement.
yeah, the suffrage movement, we were just put
A lot of women died during suffrage.
get away somewhere. Acted like we couldn't go to school. We couldn't go to college.
Couldn't have a credit card.
Until 74, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was a lucky woman when I had my man before he passed. I think about it so much now. He was a white man, but he's the kindest, understanding. No, he was. I just have to share that.
You should.
No, I
That's
get it.
fine. That's great. Nobody's saying everybody's all bad. Everybody's not all bad.
Marie,
I just love how you said it. He was a white man.
I know.
Maureen, I get it.
But I know there's a lot of stupid white men out there.
Trust me, my
There's some
husband,
dumb black ones too. I said it.
my husband is my husband's the exact same way, and he'll be the first person to say how messed up white people are.
Yeah.
Oh, you should hear my husband all the time. He's white, but he's a NOLA boy. So he always said, they always oppressing us, our people. Okay, baby. Okay.
What good time is Trump talking about? What good time is Trump talking about then?
He's talking about the Gilded Age, which is when
Great Depression.
Labor Day came about.
Right.
So he wants to go back.
He didn't even like his mother then, so I don't get it.
When the rich had all the power, all the money,
Yes.
and everybody else were working.
There were women
Come on.
that were working in sewing factories. I can't remember the exact story in New York that got caught on fire and they were locked in there and they died
Yes.
so they couldn't get out. And all these things and ocean things like that had to be created. And so we've come so far. And then we sexual harassment. Don't let us go there.
It
I
was
remember-
the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory.
Yeah.
Yes,
Triangle Waist
Yes.
Factory.
that's exactly what it was.
Yeah.
So is that why he's painting everything gold in the Oval Office and everything? I mean, I think
What it is, I think he is a narcissist. Now, this is just my lay opinion.
he's a
I think-
malignant narcissist.
And he needs all these things to quicken him once more. Like a Anne Rice novel. I want to be quickened once more. And we regretfully decline. But he needs all this pomp and circumstance. And
Narcissistic supply.
it's just so sickening.
Yeah.
And we keep giving it to him. And I heard a man say, I'm gonna shut up after this, I promise. He said, and it made me sick today. He was like, well, he was talking about groceries. And he said, I know he said he's gonna make the groceries go down. I might regret my vote, but I don't regret it. I just don't know when it's gonna come to my town because right now they're still high. I know he's gonna do it though. Still trying to believe.
Oh, you say you still stupid.
sycophants.
So there's one more video I want to show, one more quick video, just to drive home the importance of Labor Day.
This is America's first planned industrial community. And so there's a lot to be learned here.
George Pullman, the 19th century industrialist, revolutionized rail travel with his Pullman Palace car. As his business grew, he opened a factory south of Chicago, and right next door, he built a company town, which he named for himself. It was envisioned as a sort of workers' utopia.
Here, you have indoor plumbing, you have trash pickup, you have everything that a community should have, but built for the worker.
Workers and managers paid rent to Pullman for their homes in the town, which had all the amenities most working people could only dream of. Beautiful architecture, manicured landscaping and parks, a library, a church and theater, all owned and controlled by the Pullman Company.
This was the epicenter of the factory and company town. It was the administration building. And on Labor Day, it'll become an epicenter of a different kind, the Visitors Center for Chicago's first and only national monument.
Inside, you board a nearly full-size model of a Pullman sleeper car. All aboard.
This was nothing like what people had experienced in train travel.
Prior to the Pullman luxury sleeping cars, travel by rail was very, very uncomfortable, very unpleasant.
The car is actually a gateway to a permanent exhibit about Pullman, the man, the company, and the town, and also Pullman's important and unintended role in America's civil rights and labor movements.
The economic recession occurred in 1894, and the orders dropped off for the Pullman cars. He reduced their hours, he reduced their wages, but he refused to reduce their rent.
Some workers barely had enough to feed their families. Pullman employees walked out, and the conflict quickly escalated into a national railroad strike. President Grover Cleveland sent federal troops to break the strike, resulting in one of the most violent labor conflicts in American history.
At the time, the railroads in the United States were not trying to arbitrate or negotiate with employees.
In the aftermath of the strike, Pullman's company was forced to sell off the town, which was later annexed to Chicago. And President Cleveland made Labor Day a national holiday.
Perhaps a bit of an appeasement for the workers, because the strike did not immediately result in the kind of labor changes that they would hoped for.
Black history is a big part of the Pullman story, too. The company hired former enslaved people as Pullman porters who carried passengers' luggage, served their meals, and even shined their shoes.
On one end, it could be looked at as a terrible job. On the other end, it could be looked at as a footstool for self-development, for carving out the middle class.
Porters worked up to 20 hours a shift, mostly just for tips, and had to sleep on seats in the smoking car. And they faced prejudice and racism from passengers who nicknamed them after Mr. Pullman himself, harkening back to an old slavery practice.
Imagine, your name's Tom, and somebody disrespectfully calls you George. You might as well just say, hey, boy, come here.
But the porters could also eavesdrop on conversations of traveling businessmen.
Through osmosis, they had an opportunity to take that proof of concept back to their communities and start businesses.
The porters also quietly distributed Black newspapers like the Chicago Defender and Pittsburgh Courier across the American South.
My great-grandfather was a porter.
One of my grandfathers was a porter.
Wow.
I love them. I miss them.
And they called.
I was in Mexico in March, and I had one. And I had a guy who worked at a porter, and let me tell you, I wanted to bring him home with me. I just miss them. They were great people. They're always so proud. It seemed like they were so proud of their job. Yeah.
And the thing about the Pullman porters is a lot of them were newly freed former slaves.
Mm-hmm.
And they went from one form of servitude to another. They just got paid a little bit more.
I had to spend the money at the general store.
And yet,
Owned by Pullman.
And yet what I have to say, a little bit of that towards the end, is it's like I have to just shake my head and say our people always find a way.
We do.
Always find a way to make something good out of whatever's thrown their way. And I love that about our people. I really do.
Yeah.
But the idea that this man, George Pullman, created this town, named it after himself, of course, because
Yeah.
uh, and made it just this self-contained place where you lived and worked and played, reminds me of Amazon. It reminds me of
Exactly what it is.
yeah.
And
so again, like repeating history, and I find it very frightening.
Yeah.
Or Walmart. They're some
Or
of the
Facebook.
richest people around, and yet their workers need SNAP and they need welfare and they need assistance of all kinds, but they're millionaires, if not billionaires.
So Amazon and Walmart are building housing and stuff with, amenities and stuff to buy their jobs.
No, we're just speaking about the fact that they're sitting up on high where there's just these few CEOs and people that are making all the money,
It is
and
the
yet
top
their workers are still in poverty.
That's
and
right.
they won't
But you
pay
got
them
places like
a living wage.
Well, and
like Facebook and stuff like that. They had sleeping pods and play and all these different things and slides because you're gonna be there all day. So they try to make it fun.
Yeah.
But they ain't nothing but some a rat in a rat box
Yep.
running on a wheel.
And I was gonna say AOC gets a lot of crap for fighting against Amazon opening a big warehouse in Queens, but I think she wanted to avoid this very thing where the entire town is dependent on this Amazon facility where people are not paid they're not paid well enough for the conditions that are very dangerous.
Yeah.
America was built
they
on
are.
free labor and cheap labor, and it's hard for capitalists. So how are we ever going to move from that? And so America being the richest country, America is the richest country in the world, but only the top 1% get to take the money.
Well, we went from one type of servitude to the other, and like I said to some of you the other day, that when I walked into my mother's nursing home, there are all these white women in the dining room, and all of the nurses and all of the cooks and all of the staff were of color. And I'm like, how far have we become? I mean, it was almost like it was embarrassing. I don't come from a wealthy family, but I know there are a lot of wealthy women in there. I've recognized them from town and that kind of stuff. But I was like, I don't know. I was feeding my own mother. I was having my daughter do it and get her clean her plates and stuff. But it just reminded me of the movie The Help, and it was horrible, horrible to watch.
Well, I agree. When we look at the statistics, you see that how exponentially the CEO salaries have increased over the last decades, and how stagnant employees' salaries. And to me, if you're going to give corporations tax incentives, why not incent them to pay their people a living wage? But then you have companies like Costco who are role models. I mean, the CEO of Costco doesn't take these multi-million, mega million
He has morals.
salaries. Yeah. And there's few companies like that, but they're not the majority.
I didn't know what Jazzy just said. I didn't know that.
What'd she say?
That the Amazon drivers have to pee in bottles, and that UPS was it UPS? You said the next one she said.
They're
And the UPS
taskmasters.
wanted the same strict quotas.
Right.
They didn't have air conditionings in their trucks.
No,
Why can't they
my husband is a UPS driver. They do not have quotas, but in their last contract, they did get the air conditioning in the trucks.
Right.
But here's how they got around it. It's only in new vehicles. So any vehicles that they make from the contract on has to have the air conditioning, because my husband is
That's
still
sickening.
rides around in this truck, and he put a thermometer in the back of his truck for a week last year when our temperatures were rising like over 100. The back of his truck gets as high as 140 degrees. And
Oh, I
it's
believe it's a
So
metal
why don't they
box.
want them
yes,
to have air conditioning? That
yes.
don't make no sense anyway. I wouldn't drive around in a car with no air.
Well,
Right.
yeah, and they have you can see where they have the space for the air conditioner, but for whatever reason, they smashed them out. I don't know
One
why.
reason, cost.
Yeah, well, yeah, the cost, but at least they got that in the last contract, and I must say, UPS drivers get paid very, very well, but they don't have quotas. They do have heavy loads though. My husband very easily, without trying, gets overtime every single day.
There are on Monday over close to 1,000 marches and demonstrations planned for the Workers Over Billionaires event. So you can go to this website.
Maydaystrong.org.
Thank you. You can put in your zip code and find a march or protest or demonstration or rally near you for Monday. So there's close to 1,000 events across the country, and they're trying to get even more. All of these organizations are taking part. It is sponsored by the AFL-CIO union. So if you have nothing to do on Monday and you feel like getting some of your anger out or just being amongst people who are like-minded, you can visit this site, or as Katie mentioned in the chat, you can go to 5051.com.
Cool.
Yeah, perfect. I love that. Thank you, Keisha. That was a great
Yeah, it was good.
educational
Thank you.
piece on Labor Day.